I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of this newsletter is going to be casual dating attraction tips. I've got a quote I want to share with you today. This is from Chinese Proverbs. It's a great quote on patience. And the quote goes, "Patience is power. With time and patience, the mulberry leaf becomes a silk gown." It's a great topic to bring up because we're going to be talking about patience and casual relationships. And so I got an email here from a guy who's been going out with a couple of different women. And so he emails in what's basically going on with these particular girls to get some feedback on how I think he's doing, or critique what he's doing right and what he's doing wrong so he can improve. So he says, "Hey Corey, thanks so much for all you're doing. It's really great. I don't have a specific problem at the moment. This is more of a thank you note and a way of touching base with you. It seems like that you prefer to hear from people before things get bad, not after, so I'll go ahead and say what's going on with me, and then you can say something if you think it needs to be said, or just wish me luck." And one thing I want to say is that if you're applying the things that I teach, and you're getting to the point where things are starting to stumble a little bit, the worst situations are where I get phone calls from guys like after they've already been dumped, but yet weeks before they saw that things were going sideways. And so the key is to get me involved to help you before things become a total train wreck. Like I remember I had a client who was actually one of the first clients of my coaching practice when I first became a full-time life coach years ago. And I coached this guy off and on for several years. And I remember, it was the third or fourth year after I had my coaching business. He calls me out of the blue, and I hadn't talked to him in a couple of years, and last I had heard he was getting married, everything was great. And then next thing I hear from him is, "Hey Corey, my wife has been sleeping with her attorney, and she's moving out tomorrow, and I want you to help me get her back." And I remember saying to him, I was like, "I'm really glad that you waited to call, or that you called me before things got really bad." And so I was still able to help him get his wife back, but it's just a hell of a lot harder. So if you're in one of those situations where you're really nervous and you're thinking things aren't going to work out, don't send me like 15 fucking emails, because I answer emails in the order in there which they're received. And right now, the emails that I'm answering are from about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So if you have like an immediate urgent need, like you need help within the next week, book a phone session now by going to my website, click the products tab at the top of your screen, instead of waiting for things to get really bad like that one particular client mentioned. Because you make things on infinitely much harder on yourself as opposed to calling me before things get really bad. The idea is to bring me in so you get some assistance before things become a total train wreck. He says, "I'm dating 2 women right now. One is a beautiful Polish girl that I met at a party a couple of weeks ago and somehow managed to do most things right. I've always been fairly natural with women in general, and I've read some other pickup stuff, but I do have so much to learn. And I hadn't read your book at this point, and on our first date it went really well. So well, in fact, that we ended up having sex at the end of it. Good job, dude." He says, "Wow, that ruled, but when I started reading your stuff and realized I had a lot to learn and how to keep her," and then he says in parentheses, "something of a sticking point for me in the past," and that's basically what used to happen to me. Because I've always been a very social person. I've always been an outgoing person, had an active social life, and spent a lot of time when I was younger partying like a rock star, whereas like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I was out partying, hanging out, and trying to meet people, talking to girls, flirting with girls, always trying to improve my skills. And what I used to find was that when I occasionally came across women that I really like flipped my lid for, chicks that just knocked my fucking socks off, I usually would get 2 or 3 dates, and then they pretty much didn't want anything to do with me. And I didn't realize what I was doing wrong at the time when I was younger to screw those interactions up. And it wasn't until I got older and had a lot of experience through the years, a lot of trial and error, and plus getting to know. I have several friends. I have about 5 different friends I met over the course of my life that are really good with him. These are guys that are natural. Now, one of them, he's been with his wife almost 40 years, 4 decades. And they still fuck each other's brains out, and they have a great sexual relationship. And I have another buddy of mine who I went to high school with, and he's been with the same girl for about 20 years now, and she's stunning. She's beautiful, and she's like the only girl out of all the attractive girls that I went to high school with who still looks hot. She's very happy. Her and her husband are very happy, and they've had maybe 7 or 8 fights in the whole 20 years that they've been together. And I had another friend who was a male model when he was younger, and he was very good looking, and he had women throwing themselves at him, and he never, no matter where we went or what we did, he always met chicks. The thing was, he couldn't explain to me how to duplicate what he did. His advice was always, oh, just be a dick to women. And it's like, well, I'm not a dick, I'm not built that way, but he couldn't explain in words, and it wasn't until as I got older that I was able to really diagnose and learn to ask a better quality question to where I was able to elicit responses and answers that helped me figure this stuff out. So I, instead of losing the girls that I really liked, I actually started being able to seduce them and get into relationships with them. So he says, so I'm just trying to keep from talking her out of doing it with me again, as you like to say, because like what I talk about in my book and a lot of articles is the average guy, when he meets a girl who's got a shot with, what he usually does, he ends up talking the girl right out of sleeping with him because he's doing and saying things that make him look weak, and he acts in ways that are accordance with acting pretty much the way he's seen in thousands of television programs and movies over the course of his life, which is, it looks cute on film, and girls will say, oh, that's so cute, that's so sweet, that's so romantic. But when you do that in real life, you're going to get rejected. He says she's a bit of a free bird, which I think is beautiful, and we both said that we want to keep it casual. We usually go 2 to 4 days between any kind of contact to set up dates or whatever, and that's, of course, a nail biter, but she is beginning to pursue me a little. See, what's happening is you're doing something that's different than what you'd always done in the past, which is when you really started to like a girl, you started to chase and pursue more, and that's pretty much exactly what I used to do, and that's why women that I really liked tended to become scarce in my life after only having known them for a few weeks. And it was the girls that I really didn't give a shit were always blowing up my phone, and I never understood why when I was younger. And so what's happening is that you're holding back a little bit because your impulse is to call and text and pursue constantly like you've always done. And so you're just waiting and hanging back a little bit. And the best way to be when you first start dating a woman is just to call her once a week. That's a great fallback position. Call her once a week, ask her out on a date. And if you do more things right than wrong, usually by after the second date or after the third date, she'll start texting you and calling you a day or two after your date to say things like, hey, I had a really great time, or hey, I was thinking about you, or just something. Or she might text you or call you about something that's just totally unrelated to dating or anything. Like she might call you to ask for your advice. And what women are actually doing in those cases is they're putting themselves into your orbit in hopes that you realize the real reason that they're reaching out to you is they want you to make a date. But they're not going to come right out and ask you out on a date. And so that's what you're starting to see here. It's like you're not doing the things that you always did in the past, because after all, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll continue to get what you've always gotten. Obviously, you realize that what you did in the past simply was not working because it prevented you from keeping girls in your life beyond more than just a couple of dates or a couple of hookups. And so this is the kind of stuff that builds your confidence. So when you wait 2 or 3 days and all of a sudden the girl texts you, you're like, holy shit, that's exactly what Corey said. What happened? And then you use that as an opportunity to make the next date. Instead of chit-chatting on the phone, you're making the next date and then getting off the phone, which continues to facilitate her being unsure of herself, because these are basic sales skills that I teach in my book, because my background is the mortgage and the real estate business, and when you're dealing with somebody over the phone, you're trying to find out whether or not they can actually qualify, because when you get thousands of phone calls from your advertising on a monthly basis, like my company used to do when I was in real estate, you got to get good at pre-qualifying the people on the phone to make sure before you take your valuable and limited time during the week to have them come in, bring their income documents, and sit down to have an appointment with you, that you make sure they can actually qualify to buy a house, they have a job, and they make enough money, and their credit is good enough. And we would do all this stuff over the phone because, and you want to get them in the office also, because you know that in being in sales, that the only way to sell somebody is in person. And it's the same thing with dating. That was something that was really big for me. When I learned how to do this, I basically took the sales skills that I used in real estate and the mortgage and the construction industry, and I started applying that in my dating life, and it really was great because it helped me screen out women who really weren't that excited, but they may have gone out with me because it was better than staying home. And so I go out on a date with a girl that I really have no chance with, spend money taking her out to dinner and stuff, and then I get a peck on the cheek. It's like when I started applying my sales skills into my dating life, it really made a big difference for me. So he says, this, I figure, puts her in the low 70 to high 80% range of interest, meaning she's starting to pursue a little. The best ratio that I found is 70 to 80% of the calling, texting, and pursuing should be done by the woman. And so you always want to measure how often she reaches out to you. In the fallback positions, you just call once a week to ask her out. Now what's starting to happen in this particular case is she's not waiting for you to call the following week. So what's happening is she's starting to text you and reach out. And so at this point, you're probably seeing her maybe twice a week because you call, you make a date, you go out on the date, and then a day or two later, she's calling you, and then you're making the next date, which a couple days after that. So you're seeing each other about twice a week. And so as the weeks go on, if you keep doing what you're doing and you make sure that ratio stays at 70 to 80% of the calling, texting, and pursuing is initiated by her, then her calls and her texts will become more frequent to the point where after about 2 months of this, she'll be in love with you and she'll be calling and texting you pretty much 2-3 times a day, and you'll be seeing her pretty much every day. He says the other day, for example, she proposed that we start going to some museums together. And of course, this is totally the sort of thing that she should be doing with her boyfriend. And he says this guy's a real jerk. Apparently, he's hooking up with a girl that's got a boyfriend. He says, which I think is pretty fucking hilarious. Still, it would be very easy for me to mess it up because the last thing she's looking for is 2 clingy dudes, even though that's not what I'm inclined to be. And at this point is whether it looks like I am. This is where I'm hoping your work helps. This other girl is Chinese, and she's only been in England, where I now live and go to school, for 6 months. We met through a computer blind date, and I like talking to a girl face to face, but it's always fun to throw your hat in other places and see what turns up. Absolutely. Because the idea is that the more women you talk to and interact with, the more practice that you're going to get. And the more you practice, the more often you get rejected and you're willing to do it, the quicker you're going to get better. You got to get through all the no's in order to get to the yeses. So he says, given the Chinese thing, at least I think that's the reason, she's pretty conservative about how fast and how far we should go and how soon, etc. At first I was discouraged by this, but after reading your stuff, I decided not to give up, but to make it my mission to raise her level of interest just for the pure fun of accomplishing such a feat. And then if I get more, I get more. That's a great attitude to have, because repetition is another skill, and by focusing on using these skills over and over, that's how you get better. He said, I just got back from our 3rd date, at which I tried very hard to get her laughing and talking 80% of the time like you teach. I teased her a little, and she laughed. And then we parted, and I didn't try anything physical, meaning I didn't go for a kiss. Well, if you're on a 3rd date and you haven't gone for the kiss yet, you're fucking up. He says, I acted like I didn't expect or want it, and I just sort of squeezed her arm and smiled and said goodbye and went my way. Well, obviously, you should have gone for a kiss, because if the girl... See, here you are on 3 dates, and you don't know whether or not this girl really likes you. But if at the end of your 1st date, you'd have gone for the kiss, and she'd have turned her head, you would have known. Now you've gone out 3 times, basically, and you still don't know. That's why it's so important to go for the kiss on the 1st date, because girls that really like you will kiss you back. Those that don't will turn their head, and if they turn their head, you know never to call them or ask them out again. But you're getting a little too far down the road here with not making any kind of physical moves on this particular girl. So you're doing pretty good with the other chick, but the key is to allow her to continue to come to you at her own pace and monitor the texting and the initiated calls to make sure it's 70 to 80% on her part. So if you want to get my help, the quickest way is to book a paid phone coaching session. Go to my website, click the products tab at the top of your screen, and just follow the instructions. And I will talk to you soon.